competitively. Like I'm sitting there, like people are like blasting it, like they're like blasting over the fence. I'm like, this is not.
Yeah, that's not where you belong.
Can we ask to?
That's not where you belong.
That's not where we belong. So we'll see. We should totally get a United. If we're a health organization, we should get a United Way. You can play. We get a health organization. We should get a. You can play. Softball.
I cannot.
You can't play softball?
No, are you kidding me?
You just started working out.
Yeah, no, but that doesn't mean I can play. That doesn't mean I have any skills.
That doesn't mean that you have really good eye-hand coordination.
Yeah, which I don't.
So here's the caveat, though.
Yeah.
In order to play softball, you don't actually need any of those skills. Yeah. You just need an ability to want to show up. That's what I have found is most softball teams are all ruined by the fact that people don't show up to play.
Yeah.
They're like,
have fun.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
You have fun. Real quick, give us a background of your organization, like what you do. Name what you do, like what Cultiva's interests and.
Yeah, so I always tell people when they ask, "What is it you do?" We always say, "We save the world." Yeah, we at least we try and save the world of Merced County, right? So we are Cultiva la Salud. We were actually housed under your organization, that for 13 years, and thank you for hosting us for all of those years until we became a nonprofit independently, which has its challenges too. It's just because you become a 501c3 then doesn't mean that everything falls into place. It's a lot of work. And so our targeted population is our immigrant, undocumented farm worker community. People who have come to our country and don't understand like local government and the roles of each system. And so the heart and soul of our work is a curriculum that is called Powerful People, where we take them for 10 sessions and we teach them to understand what's the role of your mayor, what's the role of your city council. If you live in an unincorporated community, what's the role of your county board of supervisor? What does your park and recs department do? What does your police department do, and who oversees your police department? For them to truly understand the roles of the different departments in their communities, but with the goal of improving their community in some sense of health, whether it's improve a community park, whether it's create safer routes for kids to be able to walk or skate or hop to school, and easier for parents to push a baby carriage while they're walking their child to school. So we have a lot of different programs right now that are working on primarily it's policy systems and environmental changes. I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but when we break it down, it really is the most impactful work that we can do in our communities.
So, are you from Merced County? Are you a transplant? How long have you lived here?
No, I was born in Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, Mexico, which is right across the border of El Paso, Texas. All my family still resides in El Paso, Texas, and some have moved to Dallas. But my older sister was born here. We were in Dos Palace at that time, so go Broncos! And apparently the story is that my my parents were having a really hard time. They were stressing out, and they went back to go visit the family. And I couldn't wait. So I'm like, I'm just going to be born in Juarez since I was born in Juarez. I was the only one of my family. There's 4 of us, and I was the only one that was born in Juarez. So I was special right from the beginning. Yeah, right. And then I grew up in Dos Palos. I was a teen mother. I was pregnant in my high school senior year. And I waddled down the aisle and graduated, which is like a system that we even had to fight because they didn't want to let me do that. Oh, wow. Right? So even back then, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that we were like going against systems that, weren't supportive. Unfortunately, I started a trend because like the following year, there was like 5 pregnant young girls. But now that I'm older, right, we understand why we get pregnant at that age. which is another conversation I'll be happy to come back and talk about. But I had my son at 17 and a half, and then I went to Fresno for 7 years, hoping that the relationship with Dad would work out, but it did not. And then my parents had moved to Merced. And while I was in Fresno, I worked in the world of banking. We were held up 3 times. One was like a massive takeover.
Oh, wow.
Massive takeover. And then after that, I'm like, I think it's time to go home. And my parents had moved here to Merced. And so I moved December of 1999.
Okay.
By January, I was introduced to this world of nonprofit. And I never looked back. Yeah. I did not know. Nobody ever in middle school, nobody ever in high school said, you can have a career by helping other people. Nobody ever talked about having opportunities in the world of nonprofit. So that's something that we definitely have to change, starting yesterday. Because I didn't know that. I'm like, wait, it was the freeze of 1999. And so CVOC had an ad in the newspaper. Do you remember the newspapers? Because that's how we used to find jobs back then.
Yes, I am newspaper old. Yes, I am. My first job also came out of a newspaper. It wasn't like
these little links that would come on your phone now. Someone's hiring. You had to look in the newspaper. And it was to issue food vouchers or rental vouchers and freeze vouchers or PG&E vouchers to people that were impacted by the freeze. And those people were the people that were working our land and helping us feed us the healthy food that we get to eat. So I'm like, wait a minute, you're going to pay me to help other people? And that was my introduction to the world of nonprofit over at Central Valley Opportunity Center. Wow. I did not know nonprofits existed.
So you were doing a job for that. I mean, but then you are part of other nonprofits in Merced County, right? Like you were associated. You were with the Boys and Girls Club.
That is correct.
You were at Cultiva.
I was at CVOC for about 4 years, and that is where I met my mentor, Linda Lopez. Mm-hmm. That woman, I say her name and I get chills. But that woman stopped me in the parking lot. Like she was going to her car and I was coming across the parking lot because my office was like way down yonders. And she's like, whoa, who are you? How come I don't know you? How long have you been here? And she was a board member for CVOC. And so I introduced myself and she took me under her wing and she literally mentored me and helped me understand what the chamber was doing and why I should be engaged in this organization and why I need to participate in this committee. So I owe a lot of my my success to that woman because she just literally almost ran me over with her car, which is okay. And she's like, how come I don't know you? And yeah, she really introduced me to this bigger network and world of Merced County. So I was at CVOC for 4 years. And then I went to go manage a teen pregnancy prevention program. Okay. So it had to do with youth development. And so if we teach young children, young girls, especially young women, to have a purpose that's bigger than them, right? To have the self-confidence. And there's nothing more fulfilling than to be able to help other people. That's so fulfilling and it gives you this purpose in life, right? That you're not so easily convinced when the boyfriend comes, oh, I love you. No, I don't love you. Now we broke up. And so I managed a teen pregnancy prevention program for 4 years. And then that was a time, remember, Rob, when you had to write like proposals and they were like a book long. Yep. And then you had to make 5 copies and then like everything that could go wrong would go wrong. Your printer would stop working. Always. And then you had to get it stamped before 5 o'clock and get it in the mail, in that box. And everything that could go wrong could go wrong. Those were so stressful. I'm glad grants are not like that anymore. So anything compared to that is easy. So I did that for about another 3 years, I believe. And then the opportunity to be the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club came up, and so I ventured out there. And what better career than to go help children? And to be a part of their lives and to help them out in any way. And that's the best part. Like when I run into they were young kids back then, but now they're all grown adults. And they're like, "Are you that lady from the Boys and Girls Club?" I said, "I am." And so that's fulfilling.
Well, you see a lot of, I see that when I was in theater, like I did a lot of teaching. And so almost like 2 generations worth of kids. Yeah. So I got in and taught one group of kids, and they're all pursuing professional careers in a variety of different things. And even now there's this other group of kids that I met that were very small, and they're like maybe 7, 8 years old.
Well, you were probably like 12 if you did 2 generations.
Well, it just feels, I got the tail end, but seeing them grow up, like that's such an amazing, that's probably the most proud I think I've ever been in any work that I've ever done, seeing the work that they do as adults, but also how confident they are in themselves. And not just like, many of them aren't even doing theater, but how they've grown into adults is probably the most proud I think I've ever been of any work that I've done thus far.
And then to know that you were part of that.
Yeah.
Like no one can take that away from you.
what
No, but still, like it may be small, it feels small to us, but it may have meant the world to them.
And that you have a lot, what I'm hearing, right, is a lot of work that you've done centered around families.
Yes.
And children.
Yes.
Why?
That is my mother's doings. Yeah. So my mother, we grew up in Dos Palos, and my mother learned to speak English watching Sesame Street. And then she became a migrant aid teacher for Merced County Office of Education for years. And my mother was sort of like the resource center in Dos Palos. Everybody would come to my mom and, "Hey, I got this paper. I got this document from Medi-Cal. I got this document from my child's school. Help me navigate, again, through these systems." Unbeknownst to me that I was being trained on navigating through systems. And so my mom became sort of the resource center. And, she always raised us that our lives are not for ourselves. We were put on this earth to help other people. And that's a more fulfilling life, right? But I do want to share one story that really helped me understand how we can transform a system, and how some systems are built and not to support primarily like people who don't speak English, the Latino community. If you're an immigrant, undocumented, there's even more strikes against you, right? But my little brother, when he was little, had epilepsy. And they navigated my brother everywhere they possibly could, because there was really no treatment for epilepsy back then. He finally got better a bunch of years later, but he developed a stuttering issue. And the more nervous that he would get, the more he would stutter. And the school district wanted to place my little brother into special ed. Not that there was anything wrong with special aid, but back then, it was a different kind of system of special ed. And so my mom, with her Sesame Street English, she took on the board, and she says, my son deserves just regular education. And again, nothing wrong with the special ed system. It's amazing now. It wasn't so much back then. And so she fought the system and says, my son is going to regular school. My little brother is now a counselor for a high school, has his master's degrees. So I just think, what could have been if my mother didn't fight that system? But I didn't know that this was a system that she was taking on, right? And this advocacy that she did for her own child. I mean, that's, mothers do that. And the primary population that we work with is obviously women, because, they're the ones, the heart and soul of the family while dad usually goes off to work. But they're the ones who are navigating the different systems. And so now I have this privilege of having this career that I get to help other families navigate what's best for their families.
And I think that's something that still to this day people don't get. How difficult it is to navigate a system that wasn't even built with you in consideration.
Correct.
You know, just knowing, like, navigating a healthcare system, trying to deliver really complex medical information, assuming that if I just give out this flyer, you should, as long as it's in Spanish or in Hmong, or you'll get it. It's in a flyer, you'll get it. Knowing the importance to be able to look at the systems that we have, being able then to create a more equitable system. Yeah. And we're not asking for much, right? But what we're asking for is this ability to deliver information in a way, access, right? Increasing the amount of access and delivering the information that people will understand. And I don't think, you know, even where my upbringing, right? Knowing that, you know, obviously I come from a very privileged upbringing. I never had to navigate, one, in a language that was not my own. Two, with everything against me.
Yeah.
So knowing, like, that's where you're coming from, but even knowing that your mom did that, not as a job, but just as, this is me being a member of my community. I can't imagine how that kind of affected you, like, just reflected the rest of the work that you do today.
And then add a layer of language access to all of that, right? Yeah. Like, systems are very intimidating. This is why we always tell the different systems, that point person in the very front office, whether it's your elementary school, is key on how parents are going to feel when they walk through those doors. If you look at me up and down, you don't even acknowledge me by looking at me, I know that that's intimidation already, right? Like, I've just gone down like 20 levels of confidence. Now you're going to add this layer of communication, because I only speak Spanish, they only speak English. Where's our interpreter? Not translator, because interpretation is verbal, translation is written. I always like to share that, and so people know the difference. But these systems are intimidating, and that front person, whoever is in that system, is key on how that parent or that client is going to feel for the rest of your appointment.
Yeah. Well, because in a way it dehumanizes you, right?
Exactly.
If you're that front person, that first person, and then you are already looking down, not even responding, not, you know, treating someone like, well, you're not worth my response. Exactly. Like, so when you're, and all of the systems that we have are all created with, you know, and we've talked about this before. It's like old white guys created all these systems.
Right. And they should remain that way.
And everything should be this way because this is how they've always been. Right. And we're like, well, wait a second.
Why change them?
Why change them? Right. So I find it really interesting how much, like, just it seems like your mother has reflected, you know, and your work ethic, like your mission, right? Embracing that. Like, what other parts of, like, your upbringing, like of growing up, like has reflected in the work that you do today?
So, you know, again, all our family is in the world of service. The older sister is a CPS worker for the county. Kudos to everyone who works in that system, because, whoa. And then I'm the second oldest, so I work in the world of nonprofit. My little brother is a counselor. He was a counselor at different colleges, and now he's at a high school, so that's brave. And then my little sister is a pharmacy tech. So, you know, she helps people in a different way, but it's still helping people. And, you know, one of the things, too, is that my mother never let us forget is our language, right? And in our culture. And she raised us to talk to people with respect, right? There's this thing that de usted and tú. And we always talk with people de usted, which is just the respectful way that you always talk to people. And that has made a huge difference. I do remember one day I came into my mom, I was like in 6th grade, and I'm like, you need to learn to speak English now because we're in California. And so she backhanded me, and she's like, you little rude little girl, you're going to appreciate one day. every single day, I appreciate that my mother never let us forget to speak Spanish, because I wouldn't be here. I would not have been here if language was not a root and the base of our family and our cultura, right? And our traditions. And that's something that we're losing. And it's something that when families come to our country, the kids become quickly acculturated. And we're losing this respect.
And so describe kind of the work that you do, because obviously the whole Promotora trusted messenger model is really important to your business model, right? Your nonprofit. Just describe that. Like, describe how that works.
So imagine a network of, well, right now we have like 18 active from each community. We have a network of like 287. But imagine 20 moms that are just boom, they're empowered and they're like ready to go, and they serve as the link between really good information or opportunities that are happening on the ground for residents, and the messenger to those that need to hear the information.
I think that is the number one thing in my mind is having developed that trust and being able to deliver the information and getting it from someone that's trusted. Because, even with the farm worker program that we've been running right now, there's been issues with trust, not necessarily from United Way's issue, but an issue of distrust amongst the fact that it's a national program, it's a government program, with the knowledge of, like, when one of our representatives was talking to one of the farm workers, and they're all like, well, I didn't think it was going to happen, or because usually I get screwed out of this one. And that's not exactly what they said, but that was the idea. And just that knowledge, right? Is like, wait a second, you're already coming from this idea that just approaching you, like, I feel like I'm already going to be treated like a criminal, or I'm already going to be treated like I'm not even human, right?
Right.
And I'm still coming forward because I need this help. I think it's important to develop that trust with all of these communities, because I think that is the only way that we can get the work done. And so I applaud you for doing that, because it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
And nowadays people are just like, well, let me throw something on social media or throw it on the internet, and I did the job, congratulations. But actually being there and making that commitment to those communities takes a lot of work and consistent. I'm sure it takes consistent.
It's not enough that you show up to Planada when the floods happened and you handed out some boxes of food. That's not enough. Like, you need to keep going back to Planada. I don't care if it's just to pop up a tent and just have conversations with community people, go door to door, and make sure that people are okay. Like, just because the flood happened and now it's dry, people are still not okay. Like, let's talk about the trauma that people experienced. We had some
COVID already, right?
On top of exactly. So imagine a child who went from going to school every single day. Oh, never mind, we're shutting you down. Now you're going to learn on this little itty bitty tablet, and you're going to have to learn to navigate all of these platforms. Oh, and parents should be able to navigate all of these 1,000,003 platforms
and you don't have
on this
iPad.
And you don't have like really good Wi-Fi, our parents say. We don't have Wi-Fi to be able to stay connected. And now you're going to stay home and you're going to learn, right? And so now you're shutting these kids down, and then you have this other traumatic experience of like this. I mean, who would have thought like our communities would be flooded in this day and age? Like, we hear stories of children to this day that are afraid to take a shower. Like, who's helping with the trauma?
Well, I think there's not just even in Planada, there's a huge mental health crisis
all the way around,
all over the country.
All over.
I mean, there's not enough attention has been put towards mental health.
Nope.
I think people are kind of taking notice of it, but what happened during COVID, like, we're talking like years of trauma that has not even been uncovered.
Right.
Right. Even in the next 10 years, maybe we'll actually start to be able to understand. But again, we're not making a stance. We're not being proactive about it.
Right.
We're waiting for all those issues to come up 10 years from now.
Right. And a lot of this work, Rob, that we can't do it by ourselves.
Absolutely.
Like we're honored and we're blessed to have this network of promotoras that make me look good, right? People think that it's just Claudia. It's just not Claudia. It's like this amazing network of promotoras. It's our amazing staff that we have. It's the years of work that we've been doing. And we do the work because it's the right thing to do, right? We don't do it because, now we're going to get this grant. Like if grant comes along and helps support us and helps support our promotoras, more power to us. But we don't do the work just because it's attached to funding. We do the work because it's the right thing to do, right? And that's my mother and always on my shoulder talking to us. But we have to partner with other organizations. We partner with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce now a lot more, right? Because we are targeting the same population. We recently started working with ACEs, and where our promotoras are going through some trainings around adverse childhood experiences. I kid you not, our very first workshop, and I still get chills, we were there, it was a 4-hour session. I don't even think we were there 25 minutes in where every one of us was already crying. Our childhood experiences make up who we are today, right? And if we have not healed from that trauma, we can't help other people. ACEs, to me, is going to be such a powerful tool to help with mental health, to help with anxiety, to help to understand why it is I am doing these actions and why I'm choosing to do this. It's because I never healed that little girl in the past and the trauma that she went through to get to where I am today, right? And even having conversations with our residents who had a traumatic, everyone who crosses to the United States, from another country, that there's trauma there.
Yeah.
There's trauma when they have to leave and they have to leave their children behind and hope that eventually, you be reunited. Like there's a lot of trauma and we're just not talking about it. But I truly believe that ACEs is going to be such a huge component to healing. It should be already, but we need to get those boosted. So anyway, we're being trained so then we can turn around and train all of the other folks that we work with, which is our huge network that is overdue. What? And then, of course, we work with NAMI also. Mm-hmm. We work with Tatiana, Anissa Fragoso. And so it really does take a team of a lot of partners to do this work.
I think that's the only way you're going to be able to pull things off. If you're talking about systems change,
exactly.
Like the systems are so embedded nationally, all over the world. So you can't do it by yourself. So and getting together a large group of people to work together, I think is the only way to be able to do it. I think a lot of times, like even where we're at, sometimes we're like, well, this person should be able to do this. They need to learn English to do it. Or this person needs it. We put everything on the individual. You need to learn how to do this to be able to navigate our systems. That's impossible. Yeah. That's setting people up for failure. Right. Unless we're able to actually adequately provide access to these communities.
Right.
And, even like you were talking about, like we sent everyone home from school for COVID. So here's some computers. We don't know if you have internet or not. Or
we don't ask.
Yeah. But also, not only that, but we're assuming that you can be home during this time.
Right.
We're assuming that maybe you have a parent that can be home with you, or that you have an older sibling. Like all of these assumptions, we make that all the time.
Right.
And I think a lot of the work that you do kind of shines a light on that. Like if we're going to talk about actual, equity, we need to listen to these communities.
Correct.
First.
Correct.
Before jumping into these programs.
Correct. And that's why we're not refocusing our work at the local level, because that's always going to be our priority. But We are prioritizing now a little bit more work around the state level, right? And any opportunity that we can sit around those tables, we're going to do it. Like the Connect California, to make sure that everyone does have access to Wi-Fi, especially in like the rural communities, right? And who better than to share their challenges? Get this, I know you're going to be really surprised, Rob, but the people who live in those communities.
So that's it. So
What?
we have a quick story because Andrew was there. Do you want to describe the digital equity survey that we were at that workshop, and they were talking about this digital equity survey that they had,
Yes.
and we were at a table.
Yeah.
Let me guess, it was online.
No. Well, there was an online version, but they were very equitable. They brought it in paper,
Yeah.
in English only.
But here's the thing, though, too, is just because a document is translated into Spanish, right? I have yet to meet any Latino person who says, I don't want to learn English,
Yeah.
right? Never. I've never heard that. There's just not enough support to help folks to learn English. The other thing, too, is just because a document is translated into Spanish doesn't mean we can read in our native language. Because maybe we only had a 4th grade education where, you know, in Mexico. Yeah.
Exactly. No, because they were like, we're tackling the digital divide in these communities. So we have our survey. It's online. We're like, wait a second.
See what I mean?
And then we have this survey will be in paper. Oh, it's in English.
Yeah.
And then we were like, well, wait a second. Why are we having this meeting in the middle of the day?
Right. Yeah.
Where the only people that can be here are getting
Paid to be there.
paid to be
exactly.
here. Yeah.
Right.
So that's what it's like.
Because your job allows you to
Exactly.
do that,
Because
right?
your job allows you to be like, you know what, I'm gonna miss the morning, and I'll grab a coffee and a lunch. And
I doubt people from like, I don't know, Foster Farms are allowed to like, I'm going to go to this
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
I'll be right back. Like,
Yeah.
let me journey.
I'll be right back.
But I think that keeping that stuff in mind, that always sticks with me. Is that meeting? It's like when we're talking about actual equity, let's get beyond just like the day to day.
Well, and I think that's why like some institutions call on us, because we have to remind them of those things, right? My mother used to do this thing, like she would go into like systems. She'd walk into the front office and be like, "Can I get your common sense department?" And they're like, "Or what? Your common sense department?" And they're like, "We don't have that, ma'am." Yeah, I know. Like, so, just to share one story, like we're doing some trainings of folks who are caregivers. And I was talking to the manager that we're trying to negotiate when we can do the trainings, right? And then he's like, well, we're going to do it from 8 to 5. And then I'm like, but then who's going to provide the care to the person that they're caring for, right? But it's not their fault. It's just these things that are oblivious to us, right? Because we're on the ground and we see it and we feel it and we live it. That makes a difference. That makes a difference. Like we know we can't pull somebody 40 hours from caring for somebody so we can go and do the training. But I'm glad they do call on us, right? Because they need to hear from the folks that live in those communities.
And there's been a much stronger movement to actually try to incorporate CBOs, smaller CBOs, to do this style of work. Like everyone's like, oh, so we know now that we can't do it at our level. Literally, when they're talking like the state level, we need to bring these partners on, these smaller CBOs. And I'm like, that's great. I'm glad that you're making that statement. So now can we talk about the fact that you just offer reimbursable grants? Because if you're talking about smaller CBOs doing the work, they don't necessarily have the capacity to jump into
like
the work.
chapter 2? Because that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that is.
But that's what it means when you're talking about like these. When you're talking about like the way that people set up systems, right? They're
Those
like,
don't help. They hurt.
We want the smaller CBOs to do the work. Well, then you should pay them.
Right.
Yeah, but front $200,000 and then we'll pay you back.
Yeah, exactly.
And show me every single receipt.
And that's what I see all the time. Like I don't understand. But again, like they're thinking along. They're thinking along.
And systems like that, Rob, is one that, you and I know, been having long conversations about how we are funded, because we don't have the capacity to front a lot of money, especially if you're a new organization, right? We don't have like this $1 million endowment that sits in the bank and we're like, sure, we're just gonna, take from Peter and pay Paul, and then Paul will pay us back and we'll pay Peter back. It doesn't work like that. It's not realistic.
So there's a lot of things you've seen. How has Merced changed over the years? Merced County. How has it changed? Both good, bad, like.
I'm going to tell you, when I first moved here in 1999, I could get an apartment for $800. And that had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms.
That is.
Oh goodness.
That's impossible.
You don't see a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment anymore for $800.
Not so much.
I mean, unless it's like burned to the ground for.
Yeah, right.
Just paying for
maybe
the
you
wreckage.
can get a closet for $800.
Right.
That has been the biggest impact that has hurt our community. We're grateful that we have the newest UC in California, right? That's huge.
Yeah.
We all sat around the tables back then and said, why Merced? Why not Madera? And we advocated to have it, to have the university here in our backyard. But it's also hurting the folks that have been rooted here a long time ago, before UC Merced, that were not taken into consideration, right? Everything is growing, and everything's growing towards the north side, towards North Merced, towards UC Merced. But we cannot ignore and forget about the folks that were here before, that have been here, that are rooted here, that help feed us the most healthiest foods in the world.
Right.
And they too need the same attention and care and growth on, if we're talking about Merced on this side, than it is on north side, right? That we we can't be forgotten. Like that's not okay. So housing has been a huge issue. Like, we deal with housing issues all the time. And we don't have enough resources. Unfortunately, we don't have enough resources to help them.
That's come up a lot, really. I mean, just
Oh, yeah.
again, like this consistent, in a lot of these interviews, this consistent narrative about living here is so expensive compared to what people actually make to live here. And I don't know how to fix that, right?
We did the math. You have to make $35 an hour to comfortably pay for your apartment. Where are those jobs?
Yeah, where is that industry job?
Where's those jobs?
Yeah, where are those jobs? Because that's difficult. I mean, that's a huge price tag, and that doesn't exist necessarily here in this community on a wide scale.
3 families living in a 2-bedroom apartment just to be able to pay for your housing. That's, we see that in the Bay Area, but that's the Bay Area. You never thought that would happen in the Central Valley. And that in itself, and you want to link that to mental health.
So what have you heard today?
I've heard a lot.
I know. I thought we only had 15 minutes.
No, we have as much time as we need. I want to ask you a few questions. How do you know when you talk about navigating systems and about fighting systems? When do you know when it's time to navigate a system and when it's time to fight a system?
We navigate systems every day, Andrew. We navigate a system. If it's in your health insurance, what do you mean you can't pay a deductible of $500? Or what do you mean you're going to charge me $3,000 for an ear exam? Or what do you mean that my insurance doesn't pay for a hearing aid that cost me $3,800, right? Like, that's not cosmetic. That's basic. And I say that because, that happened to me personally. But we navigate systems every single day. As soon as we wake up, we're navigating a system. Like, we go to work and we're navigating another system. You drive and, you want to make sure that you're not going to get a ticket. You drop off your children in school and you trust that system take care of your child. Or you take your child to the corner where there should be a bus, but there's no bus now to pick up your child because there's no bus drivers because nobody wants to drive buses anymore. So we navigate systems every single day. Now, when do we interrupt systems? Is when they do not support our families. When we do not have bus transportation, and now we have to drive our child 15 miles up the road and then pick them up and then have them take a 3-hour break and then take them back because he plays soccer, and now I have to drive him all the way to Patterson because there's no buses to drive our children. That's when you stand up and we're like, okay. But it's not like you stand up and we're gonna, just create chaos. We stand up. Cultiva la Salud stands up. Our residents stand up and say, how can we help? If you don't want our help, then okay. But our approach is always, how do we help? If we identify a system that is not working, right? And that's a perfect example because that's what's happening in our communities of Gustine. I just met with some parents over there. They literally went door to door announcing that there was bus driver positions available so they can find somebody to drive the buses. Hopefully by Monday they have 2 new bus drivers. But those are the things that it's just not the system that isn't working, right? Because sometimes that system itself has its challenges because that system has a system and then that system has another system. But when we can help, especially when it comes to our children, not just our children, because in Latino community, everybody's children is our children. We're not going to do something just because it's going to benefit our children. It has to benefit all of the children. So the ladies got some flyers and they went door to door and they found 2 bus drivers willing to take on the role. So we deal with systems every single day. Now, when we don't know the system that isn't helping us is when our training truly helps, right? Is when we're on our street, for example, and there's one crossing guard. It's great to see because there is no crossing guards over here by Tenaya or by Shihi. See?
Tell me about a moment in your life that was a turning point where you had maybe 2 roads that were in front of you and you chose one that changed, or a moment where everything changed and your direction became clear to you.
When I moved to Merced. When I left Fresno in December of 99, I was at midnight mass. And on Christmas Eve, midnight mass, and they broke into my car. And if that is not a sign from up above, I do not know what is. I literally gave my notice and I'm like, I'm out. I came to Merced with the intent of moving on to the big city because I wanted to be important in the big city. And I opened up that newspaper and Central Valley Opportunity Center was hiring for intake workers. I didn't know what an intake worker was, but I just read that it said bilingual mandatory, right? In English and Spanish. So I'm like, okay. And I applied for the position and she interviewed me over the phone first. And then my Espanol was very good looking, so I passed. And so then I went in person. And so then I started that job again in this world of nonprofit, issuing support to those most vulnerable. I did not know that the world of nonprofit existed. Nobody talked to me about that in middle school, in elementary school, or in high school, or even the college classes that I took. Nobody. And when I discovered that I could have a career and help those most vulnerable, they talked about being a medical like assistant or, cutting people's hair. And, I smile because, yeah.
I have no interest in that.
I don't have any interest in
Cutting people's hair?
or having my hair cut.
Oh, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
that'd be kind of difficult in your situation, Andrew. But it wasn't like, hey, I didn't see assembly women that look like me. I didn't see school principals that look like me. I didn't, those palos. And so when I discovered the world of nonprofit, I said, I'm not going anywhere. So I started at CVOC as an intake, and then I issued out the vouchers, and then I was quickly promoted to job developer, where I would go and talk to businesses and then find employment, permanent employment for those that finished the training. And of course, CVOC trained migrant farm workers, displaced workers. So it was very fulfilling to place, for example, a young man who was working in, I don't know, the tomato fields. And then now he is making $27 an hour back then as a welder, like with benefits and this thing called vacation that I have to look into, because people always like, I'm going on vacation. I'm like, what is that? I need to look into that.
It's overrated, doesn't it?
I think so. Like, but I'm still going to check into it. And sick leave, like that was very satisfying to me to know again that we were a part of someone's life. And again, even to this day, like you run into people that you help place, and they're either there or they've went to management, but you know that they have a better life because you were a part of it.
I see what it is now. I see what it is. This whole time I've been sitting here and listening to you, and you're such an incredibly powerful. You're just so powerful in your person.
Oh, thank you.
I've been sitting here and thinking, what is the source of her power? What is it? And all of the things that you're saying, what is the source of that? And then there were two different things that you talked about. You talked about when you met your mentor and were almost run over by the car, and you talked about the experience with the ACEs. Right, when your first experience with that, and in both cases, you mentioned that you reacted physically, that you got chills when you thought about those things. Yep. And now, as I listen back, I realize that I think the source of your power is your connection, all of those connections. Everything that you talk about is your connection to the community, your connection to the people, your connection to the people that you work with, your connection to the past. And I think that's the source of your strength. You're one of the most connected people I've ever met in my entire life.
Well, thank you.
And that's really special. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. You see, now you're giving me more chills.
Well, we've made a connection.
Thank you. I've never seen it that way, but I think you're right. And I think we all need to be connected to something, something, some bigger purpose again, right? Like when I spoke about teenage pregnancy, there was no connection to anybody else, besides my son's father. But and this is why it's super important even for our promotoras, because if they didn't have this, what would they be connected to, right? And what is the biggest cause of depression? Right, like
I think that's kind of powerful. Yeah, this need. We're even talking about how to tackle some of these bigger issues, like being more interconnected, connecting organizations and people together to be able to tackle this stuff. I think that is being able to establish true connection. Right, I think is sometimes lacking. Right.
And nobody wants to be alone.
Yeah,
nobody wants to be alone.
Yeah.
We all need to be a part of a purpose and be connected to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
What an honor. Thank you.
No,
We appreciate it.
It's all ours.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.